The first case he ever tried. Remarkable memory, and that memory lasted until his last breath. You know, Burkett had a classic way of dressing, so to speak. He'd often go to New York and he'd buy an expensive suit or two, and he'd buy shirts and he'd buy ties, and he'd ask the tailor to make the cuff of his pants about 2 or 3 inches longer than they should be. And the fellow said, no, I don't want you to do that, and I don't want to do that. That's going to drag on the floor. He said, you got to understand something. I'm a country lawyer. I got to look like I don't have a whole lot of money. Well, you know, they had the hats, and years ago when they were a little less expensive, you know, he was concerned about he didn't have enough money to do anything. But anyway, he said he bought Italian-made hats. And I know this to be a fact. He'd take that hat once it came out of the box, he'd bang it up, he'd smash it up, he'd push on it and pull on it and do everything, throw it in the back seat of his car for 2 or 3 weeks, and then he'd wear it. I'm serious. That was an Italian-made hat, and they all were treated that way, again, because he wanted to appear that he was just an old country boy. Now, he was an old country boy, but you can see by all of the certificates out there, he was no dummy. He actually finished number 2 in the bar exam until some lawyer later went back and regraded it and found that he actually finished number 1 in the Tennessee the year that he took the bar exam. Not bad for an old country boy. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with him, or actually listening to him, and he said, you know, one of my professors years ago when I was in law school told us that we didn't have to worry about when we lawyers would have to retire. He said, your clients will tell you. They'll quit coming to you. So I'm giving some advice to the lawyers. We'll all know when it's time for us to quit because we won't have any clients. You know, but it's interesting, Burkett continued to have clients. And it's amazing, you know, here a man 94 years old, and as he said it to me, I can't hear, I have trouble seeing, I can't walk. Why would anybody hire me? But they continue to do that. Well, you know, Burkett grew up on a river bottom farm where he worked hard. And he told me that this lady once asked him, from Kingsport, asked him, have you ever gone out and ridden horses lately? And he said, forgive me, hell no. It took me 21 years to get off a horse. I'm not getting back on one. Now, I learned an awful lot of sound legal and non-legal advice from Burkett. He told me to listen carefully to what a witness says, but he said listen more carefully to what they don't say. Man, that's great advice. And you know, it's good advice today with the politics going on right now and you're having to decide who to vote in a lot of different elections. Listen for what they say, but more importantly, listen for what they don't say. That's usually the key. Burkett's dad, Ed McInturff, had a great philosophy that Burkett shared with me and shared with others. Ed had told him, do what you say, pay what you owe, and tell the truth. He did that. Cumberland University law school professor at one time said something that Burkett shared with me, and I thought, this is not right. The professor said, men, and it was all men at that time in law school, it's more important that a matter be settled than for it to be just. Now think about that. It's more important for a matter to be settled than for it to be just. I struggle with that saying until I understood, after representing folks for a good while, that you know, you have a lawsuit, you cannot, as an individual, now lawyers might, if you got sued, you may think about it differently, but individuals who are not lawyers, they cannot focus on anything in their daily lives except that lawsuit that's going on. whether they're on the plaintiff's side or the defendant's side, but particularly on the defendant's side. They cannot go to sleep at night without it comes to their mind. They cannot get up in the morning. They can't go out to eat. They can't do anything without they think about that. It is far more important that a matter be settled than for it to be just. A lot of people want a little more justice. And what this professor was saying, as long as you get some, maybe it's better to just get it over with so you don't have to deal with it. Different kind of advice from Burkett. He also told me, and this is very important for lawyers, and there are a lot of them here today, and I appreciate that very much. He said, get a large enough retainer at the beginning of the case so that if you don't get another dime, you'll be happy with it. Anybody have that problem ever? He also told me what he did when he got a fee that was more than $500. Jimmy ever tell you that? What I do if I get a fee of more than $500 or $500 or more. He said, I take 1/3 of it and I put it into the IRS and I send it immediately. I take 1/3 of it and I put it in the bank. And I take 1/3 of it and I put it in my pocket. And he did. He carried a lot of money. Probably a lot of you know that. He carried a lot of money around with him. And he also told me, and I've used this every time since he told me, he said, when your client gets off the witness stand or you've had a deposition and the client always says, how'd I do? He said, never tell them that they did a good job. Because if you lose the case and you've told them you did a good job, then they're going to blame you because you're the only one that didn't do a good job. When he argued any case to a jury, you all know this, particularly in the criminal field, he handled reportedly more capital cases, that is, cases where the death penalty was asked for, than any other attorney in Tennessee. He was once ranked as one of the top 50 criminal lawyers in the United States. So he tried a lot of cases. He knew what the law was, and he knew people. But he said, when you're arguing to any jury, he said, you need to always have looked in the case and find the human pull. Well, what he was talking about was, what is it that's going to grab the heart of the people on that jury who are going to say, well, maybe this person needs a second chance. Or maybe this person just didn't know what they were doing at the time. Or maybe we just need to kind of think about what would we do under the same circumstance. Well, it worked pretty well for him. And it works well for us if we'll use that. Look for the human pull. The most impressive thing about Burkett is how he cared for his clients. Many of these clients you and I would not find very attractive or winsome. Many have done despicable things, yet Burkett would work tirelessly to provide them with $1 million defense, even if he had been appointed to the case. There will never be another man like him. Now, let me ask anybody who would like to come up and say a few words, just take a little time, about Burkett or share a story that you know about Burkett. I think it would be great to have you come up. Anyone like to come? Dennis, you're here. You want to come up? We have to bow to the mayor. Then Jason will let you come next, and then anybody.
Anytime a politician can get behind the pulpit, he needs to take advantage of it. I actually started out with a tie this morning. I got up to Jamboree and I got gravy all over it. I met Burkett McInturff about 1970 when I was a teller at Kingsport National Bank. And he would come in, I don't know to use the word ask, maybe telling the tellers what he wanted. And Burkett had a voice that could be intimidating, but through the years, for some reason, he and I always got along. And as mayor, I was never short of a time that Burkett didn't have an opinion on the job I should be doing. and he never failed to express that. One time, about 4 months ago, a lady called me and said, I have a complaint about your policeman. And, that's not unusual, but I said, well, what's the problem with the policeman? She said, well, they're allowing Burkett McInturff to drive around town without a driver's license. And what are you going to do about it? And I thought, And I said, lady, do you have a copy of the Serenity Prayer? She said, yes, I do. And I said, let's go read that one more time. How would, you attorneys, a lot of you are judges at times and sit in for judges or full time, and I think often you're going to be sitting there with your nice robe on, and Burkett's going to be down there with a ticket in his hand because he was driving without a license. And how would you like to be? How many attorneys would like to be that judge? But out of every passing, there comes some good, and Burkett is no exception. As mayor, I'm pleased to tell you all that our fiscal year began July 1st. I've met with the city manager this morning. Those of you that live in the city, we're going to be able to lower the tax rate this year by 3 cents because the money that we had appropriated to repairing the roundabouts is going to be taken out of the budget. So that will be a direct savings to you as taxpayers. Thank you.
All right, Jason, take a gulp and come on up here.
Thank you. When I met Burkett McInturff, I'd only come to know him through stories. And he had came into the Janmar, and I asked Anissa Green, I said, is that Burkett McInturff? And she said, it sure is. It's the one and only. And I got up immediately, walked to his booth, and I sat down. And he looked up at me, and he said, who are you? Well, I ended up asking Mac the same question. And I was able to capture those stories and put them in his biography. And just really happy to have met the man. I've got some humorous stories, but I'm not going to do that today. I just wrote something for everybody. It's going to be brief. And it's called All at Once. If you could look at this picture. All at once, as the burning sun came into view on the horizon the morning of June 29, 2012, a mass group of little sparrows arose all at once from the tangled and knotted branches of an old hickory tree. The wind, like a cool, invisible spirit, had passed over the group of birds, and all at once they'd assembled from their perches and disappeared into the bright and shining sky. I watched these sparrows in silent glow, swooping suddenness with a warm heart. Burkett C. McInturff all at once was not leaving this world, but truly meeting it, passing through it, and with a wave all at once saying, I'll see you. And it is only a short while, friends. I still see him every day. Every day. Somewhere out there each day, he's watching with his associates. When I met Mac and he had introduced me to someone, he said, this is my associate. And time passed, and this is my friend. And there at the end, he called me, this is my boy. Maybe from the lofty branches of an apple tree, he's with those associates. And if you look sometime, all at once, you may see him too. The beautiful fact of having a friend is knowing you will never lose one another, ever, never in spirit. And it is that spirit, like a group of little sparrows, which soars high and low and is so real and powerful. Now this knowledge can transform itself into a powerful wisdom to realize all at once. So I'm asking you today to not see with your eyes, And I'm asking you not to soar with wings. I'm asking you to smile and to laugh. And if you haven't already, then all at once. I'm just asking you simply to believe. I'll see you. Thank you.
You can see the impact, can't you? Anyone else? Please, somebody come, because that was hard for me to do that without crying. All right. This is it. We're in for a treat.
I promise, Shelburne, this will be short. I don't need that microphone. Do whatever we need to do. Here's the reason I'm a lawyer. Mr. McInturff enlisted me to be a character witness for Bill Neal when he was charged with embezzlement at Dobbins Bennett High School. And he called me and said, "Boy, I need you to come to court." I said, "Yes, sir, Mr. McInturff, I'll come." I said, "What do you need me for?" He said, "I want you to talk about his character." I said, "Okay, Mr. McInturff, I'll do that." So for 4 dutiful days, I sat there during the trial, and I watched Mr. McInturff try that case, and I decided then that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a criminal defense lawyer. But the rest of the story is probably better. Proof got through, and it was our turn to put on the proof. And Mr. McInturff looked over at me, and he said, "Boy, you that mailboy's son?" I said, "Yes, sir, that's me." He said, "Won't be needing you." I said, "Why, Mr. McInturff?" He said, "We're done for." And he really is the reason I am a criminal defense lawyer, and that's the truth. That's honest to God truth, and to me, that's a wonderful thing. I loved him. I became very close to him as he got older because I would go to court with him when he had a case. He would always call me and ask me to go with him. I tried the last case he ever tried. That was in General Sessions Court. We never got paid because Burkett knew he and I were very much alike. He knew that I didn't really care because we had fun. And anyway, we went to court, General Sessions Court, with a gentleman by the name of, let's just say, Jerry. Jerry was an interesting human being. Anyway, we tried a DWI case together. And Burkett couldn't hear anything. I mean, he could not hear anything at all. So I would stand there and I would translate for Burkett while they were testifying. So Burkett gets through questioning the witness, Mr. Epps, and we sit down and the judge issues his ruling. And Judge Calkins said, "Guilty." And McInturff said, "What do you say, boy?" I said, "Mr. McInturff, we're done for her." And he said, I'll never forget this, and God forgive me, but he said, "Gee, we got screwed." And I mean, the place was packed with people, and then he just walked out, and that was it. And in a way, that was probably a good exit for him because he never had a guilty client, and he never lost a case. It was always the judge's fault or the jury's fault.
Anybody want to follow that act? Jimmy? While Jimmy's coming up, I'll tell you all, most of the lawyers, I'd say, have heard this, but I asked Burkett if he had any cases one time after he got out of the hospital, and he said, "Yeah, I've got 2 down in Hawkins County I'm going to have to try." Well, he finally was able to go down there and try those 2 cases, and he came back, and he was so excited. He came back and said, "I tried both those criminal cases down there in Hawkins County. I never heard one thing in that trial, and I won both of them." And someone asked him, "Well, how did you know when to object?" He said, "When the Attorney General stood up, I objected."
Dad once told me that he He said, always keep this in mind when you get before a jury. Justice for the many, justice for the free. Let each man be paid in full. That is just enough for me. He said, get that to him, no matter how many objections you've got to overcome.